So last night was not a good night for Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, he lost Florida and North Carolina by relatively large margins. Hillary Clinton picked up some really important wins in those states. Now, as expected, he wasn't actually going to win those, right? And the polls were pretty much right. She won by a large margin. He lost by a large margin. She ended up getting a lot more delegates. Now, where he could have pulled out an upset win, but unfortunately didn't, was in the states of Ohio and Illinois. Now, Ohio went to Secretary Clinton by about 14 points. She actually did pretty well considering the polling. That's a big win for her in a state that we thought could be a lot like Michigan. Now, remember how Michigan broke the polls and actually made Nate Silver in 538 say, wow, that's one of the biggest polling upsets in history. We got to change our method, right? We got to figure out where we went wrong. Well, Michigan turned out to be a bit of a, I guess so far, a fluke. Unfortunately, especially when you look at the numbers in Ohio. Now, Illinois, it was a bit closer. It was a bit of a squeaker. She won by 2 points. And of course, in Missouri, it's still essentially tied. They're like in the 0.2, 0.3 range. So last I looked. So it's essentially a tie in Missouri. Now, the good news. The delegate count is proportional. So that means Senator Sanders brought home some delegates. That's a good thing. That adds to his total delegate count. And now, according to the Associated Press, the total delegate counts for Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton now stands at 1,132 delegates, while Bernie Sanders is at 818. Now, that sounds bad, right? Not so much, because when you look at some of the states coming up ahead, it gets a little bit brighter for Sanders. Now, a big win, for example, in New York or California could instantly erase Secretary Clinton's lead. Now, that said, you're going to see a lot of news reports. You're going to see a lot of things about the superdelegates, right? Where they include the superdelegates into this thing. I'm not counting them. Why? Because, well, they're supposed to swing with the popular vote. That's what they're supposed to do. They can pledge to support a certain candidate, but when it comes to the popular vote, whoever wins the most popular vote, the superdelegates are actually supposed to come with them. Now, that's interesting because that only exists on the Democratic side. Ironically, the Republican side has no superdelegates. They're actually a bit more Democratic. Ironic, right? Now, I'm sure the question on everyone's mind is, does Sanders still have a path to victory? Or a path to the nomination? Well, to answer that, yes, he does. Although it is a very difficult path. Now, let me list some of the advantages that both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders have in this primary. Now, Hillary Clinton obviously had a big advantage when it comes to name recognition. Everybody knows who Clinton is. Everybody knows who Hillary Clinton is. Everybody knows who Bill Clinton is. Huge, huge name recognition, right? She also had the advantage in superdelegates, which I just detailed earlier. Huge advantage in the media. Now, the media is very, very important. A lot of the media, especially mainstream corporate media, have written off Bernie Sanders. Written him off, barely gave him any airtime. In fact, most of the airtime didn't go to Clinton, it actually went to Donald Trump. So the media would regularly cut away from Bernie Sanders' speeches or not even cover his rallies, and they went to talk about Donald Trump. So the media, and when the media did cover Senator Sanders, it was often in pieces that were not complimentary to him, where they would write him off. So obviously the media has not been very friendly to Senator Sanders, and that has been a big advantage to Hillary Clinton. Now, endorsements. Endorsements, I don't know. Some people would say that it's an advantage. I'm not sure. There's right now no big evidence that endorsements have really helped or hurt in this election cycle, especially from politicians. Now that brings me to the next thing, which is being part of the establishment. Being part of the establishment has huge advantages. Now you have money, you have organization. Once again, you also have the endorsements, you have the superdelegates. You've got all these things that being part of the establishment benefits. So, I mean, that's also ties into the media. The media is also part of the establishment. So you've got establishment media like CNN, MSNBC, that are not going to give this candidate that much airtime, or when they do, it's not going to be complimentary. It's not going to be friendly. And look, I'm all about media being fair, asking tough questions. But I think the majority of this campaign, this primary, you've seen a lot of questions that have, one, right-wing framing, and two, obviously, more tough questions towards Senator Sanders, where Hillary Clinton got a little bit more favorable treatment. I'm not saying she has been completely untested or unchallenged by the media. In fact, I think Univision did a fantastic job challenging her. So much so that I think that she was reeling from some of those questions. But certainly, you can contrast that with, for example, the town hall with Chris Matthews. Yes, he went after her on Iraq. I think that was good. But the rest of the interview, very flowery, very, very light. They're giggling, they're laughing, they're having a good time. So, not a good example of the media doing its job and asking tough questions. Like as I said, I want tough questions, but I want them for everyone. I want them to be completely objective when they talk, when they ask candidates questions, when they do these debates, when they do these town halls. I don't think that's that much to ask, to be honest with you. Now, moving on, another advantage towards Hillary Clinton is that we just got done with all the front-loaded southern old Confederate states. Those overwhelmingly went to Hillary Clinton. She won pretty much all the southern states. Now, a lot of those southern states, they will not go to Democrats in the general. But they had large enough minority populations, African Americans especially, to propel her to big wins. Now, why they front load the states that will never vote for a Democrat in a general election first, I have no idea. But that's what they do. That's how the Democrats set it up. And unfortunately, that goes to the detriment of Senator Sanders and to the advantage of Hillary Clinton. Now, as I said, she does very, very well with Southern African American voters. So that has been a huge, huge advantage. Now, Bernie Sanders, however, he also has some advantages. One of them is the fact that he is a fundraising machine. But he's not fundraising from the machine. He's actually getting it from the majority of his fundraising has all come from individual donors giving $27 apiece. This is a real grassroots fundraising organization. Doesn't have a super PAC, doesn't have wealthy donors. He gets his money from you. He gets it from the people. Now, going on to his advantage, he also has a populist message. In order to appeal to the people, in order to get them to actually donate to his campaign, he's got to have a good message. He's got to have a message that resonates with the people, and he does. Another thing that helps him is his record. He's had a sterling record. It's been a record of fighting for progressive values. You know where he stands because he's been fighting the same fight for his entire career, ever since he was mayor of Burlington. Another advantage, he's actually more electable than Hillary Clinton. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, but I heard on CNN, but I heard on MSNBC, all they're saying is how Bernie Sanders is not electable, how Hillary Clinton is the electable one. No. You look at every single poll that matches up Senator Sanders versus a Republican, any of the Republican contenders that are left, Donald Trump, John Kasich, and Ted Cruz, Bernie Sanders annihilates them. And some of the polls, when it's Hillary Clinton versus Trump, it's very, very close. It's too close for comfort. Sometimes she loses by a point. Sometimes she's winning barely by a point. And John Kasich annihilates her. It's like a bloodbath. So who is more electable in that situation? Not only that, but adding to the electability argument, Senator Sanders gets independents and young people, not just Democrats. Hillary Clinton does very, very well with Democrats. She does very well with minorities. But Bernie Sanders has a wider appeal because of how much of the country is actually made up of independents and young people, first-time voters. He crushes with independents. He crushes with young people. Those are two demographics that are very, very important to a general election. Not so much in a primary, unless you have an open primary in certain states. And certain states do. Certain states have closed primaries, and those, of course, benefit Hillary Clinton because you have to register with a party. He does very well with groups that are very important to a general election, meaning he is more electable and he does better against Republicans. Those are huge advantages that unfortunately are not conveyed by corporate mainstream media. They don't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it because they want to continue this inevitability coronation for Hillary Clinton. Now, those are the advantages for Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. She obviously has more advantages, but they're not insurmountable. Now, the question is, will it be enough? Now, I mentioned the front-loaded states, right? Now, most of the states won so far by Clinton have been in the Old South. These states, of course, never go Democratic in the general, but I have to continue to remind you that because it's very, very important. They're not Democratic states. These are Republican states. They're not important in the general. That goes back to the electability argument. Now, there are a couple exceptions here where Clinton has had some very big wins. One of those is Florida. And now Florida is, of course, a swing state. Clinton winning Florida by a huge, huge margin is pretty significant. Even in a general, that's going to be a significant boost for her in a general election. Will she win it? I'm not sure. But she has a better chance. She has a good chance if she gets the nomination. Ohio is another swing state. She did very well there as well. So those are the exceptions, right? Now, on to Ohio. Now, this is anecdotal, but I have heard instances of Democrats crossing over to vote in the Republican primaries in order to stop Donald Trump. Now, of course, doing that, why would they do that? Why would they vote in the Republican primary? Well, they wanted to stop Donald Trump, so they voted for John Kasich. Now, that allowed Kasich to pull out a win and actually deprive Trump of some delegates. Now, some of those voters that have done that, well, they might have been Senator Sanders supporters, but have been like, I don't want Donald Trump to win Ohio. We cannot have him win here. We can't do it. So we're going to take our vote, we're going to cross the line since it is an open primary in Ohio, and we're going to vote against Trump. I don't think that was the smartest strategy, especially considering how Bernie Sanders in a matchup could beat Trump easily, handily. But as I said, that has been what I've heard. It's anecdotal. I wouldn't put a ton of weight into that, but I think it's worth mentioning. Now, so now that the front-loaded Clinton states are done, meaning we're done with the old Confederate states, we've essentially moved into what we call primary 2.0. Now, what is that? Well, primary 2.0, you're done with the South. Now you get into the Midwestern and the Western states. Those look a bit more favorable to Clinton. And look, there's a lot more delegates, more importantly, to be rewarded. Now, in order for Sanders to catch up, I think he needs to win, and he needs a couple really big wins. He can't just do a 2% or a 1% win since the delegates are proportional. He needs a big win. Now, in some of the states that he has won, he's actually won by big margins. What put Clinton ahead is the massive blowouts she's had against him in the South. But there are certain states where he's also had massive blowouts. If he can get a lot of those, if he can start winning by that margin, that's going to be very good. That'll allow him to catch up and eventually take the lead. And what are some of the biggest prizes? California and New York. These are the biggest states, and alone, they have 837 delegates. Now remember, right now, Senator Sanders has 818 delegates. Two states could double his lead, or double his delegate count and give him the lead if he wins big there. Now, it's not winner take all, so it's going to be proportional, but he's got to have a big win if he's going to catch up. Now, you also have a lot of states that I had mentioned that are friendly to Sanders demographically. Now, that doesn't mean he's guaranteed to win, but it is friendlier territory than the South, and he might be able to pull up some big wins. Now, what was important about yesterday was less about delegate count and more about momentum. Unfortunately, he's not going to go into those states with a lot of momentum, but nonetheless, that doesn't mean that he'll lose those states without it. Don't get me wrong here. I want to keep it 100% real for you guys. Bernie Sanders still has a chance. Now, after last night, the road got a lot harder, but I don't want everybody listening or watching to get discouraged. I just want everybody to know what we're facing so that we know when we can climb that hill. Political revolutions, they're not easy. There are people out there that are afraid of radical change. So it's our job to get out and do our best to calm the fears of people, and while we're doing so, try to kick over the establishment's apple cart. Now, last night, if you listened to Bernie Sanders' speech, if you were able to, he was not somber, he was full of energy, he was full of fight, he was excited, and that's what we all need to be. And come the convention, win or lose, man, the point is that we started something. Now, that thing might not happen this time, but the political revolution to restore the middle class and give the country back to the people instead of the corporations, that must continue. That will continue.